Hi guys, welcome to solving cubic and cube root equations. So what we're going to do is we're going to take cubic equations and cube root equations and solve them for x. And we're going to use the concept of inverses, as you can see from our essential question. So our steps to solve a cubic equation. We're going to first isolate our variable expression. That means we're going to get the cube all by himself. Then we're going to raise both sides to the reciprocal power. Well, the opposite of cubing is cube rooting. So we're going to cube root both sides, and then we're going to solve for the variable. Here's our first equation. We have x cubed equals 8. So this is a cubic, because it's third power, equation, which says equals. So we're going to look to see, is he isolated? Is the cubic, the thing to the third power, isolated? Yeah, he's all by himself. Since he's isolated, all by himself on one side of the equal sign, we're going to do reciprocal power. So I'm going to go on both sides, and I'm going to cube root. Let me clean some of this off so it's not so nasty looking. So I'm going to, on both sides, cube root, because the opposite of cubing is cube rooting. And again, why do we do that? Because the cube root and the cube cancel. Now, I need to figure out what the cube root of 8 is. So what number, when I multiply himself 3 times together, makes 8? Well, that number is 2. Because 2 times 2 times a third 2 makes 8. So what are we doing? Isolate, cube root, solve for x. Now, if I don't know what the cube root of 8 is, I can use my calculator. I can go to the calculator, and I can type in 8 to the 1/3 power, and that'll tell me 2 also. So just in case you have trouble figuring out what the cube root is, you can just go to your calculator and put whatever your number is to the 1/3 power, and it'll tell you. Let's try another. All right, first of all, we need to check to see if he's isolated. He's a cubic because he's got a third power. He's got an equal sign, so he's an equation. The cubic is 5x cubed. But that 5's over there, so bye-bye 5. We're going to divide by 5 on both sides. So I have x cubed equals, I'm going to take negative 135 divided by 5. I get negative 27. And now I check to see, is he isolated? Yes, he is. Since he is, we're going to cube root both sides. That's the inverse, it's cube rooting. So cube root and cube cancel. So it gives me x equals the cube root of negative 27. And then again, I can always go to my calculator and figure out what negative 27 to the 1/3 power is, and it'll tell me in the calculator that it's negative 3. Or I could say what number times himself 3 times gives me negative 27, which is also negative 3. So you have a couple ways to do this. Remember, isolate, cube root, solve for x. You got this. Let's try another one. All right, let's see if he's isolated. Here's the cube. It's got a 3 in front, so I've got to isolate by dividing by 3 on both sides. So I have 2x minus 1 to the 3rd equals, now I'm going to take negative 192 and divide it by 3, and I get negative 64. And then I check, is he isolated? Yes. So now I'm going to cube root both sides. And again, we do that So cube and cube root cancel. So I get 2x minus 1 equals the cube root of negative 64. Then I go over to my friend the calculator and I put in negative 64 to the 1/3. And it'll tell me that it's negative 4. So 2x minus 1 is equal to negative 4. And then I do need to solve for x. So I'm going to add 1 to both sides. And divide by 2. And I get the answer is negative 3/2. So again, isolate, cube root, solve for x. That's cubic equations. Cube root equations are basically the same idea. We're going to isolate the cube root. Then we're going to raise both sides to the reciprocal power, which means we're going to cube, and then we're going to solve. So we're using this idea of inverses again. So this one's a cube root equation. Here's the cube root. He's isolated. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cube both sides. That means the opposite of cube root is cubing, or third power. So cube root and cube will cancel, and it gives me x equals 2 to the 3rd. And again, I can go to my friend the calculator. 2 to the 3rd power is 8, because 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. And I just solved the problem. So isolate, cube, solve for x. Let's try another one. I'm going to check to see if he's isolated. Here's the cubic. Here's the cube root. Oh, he's got a 2 over here, so bye-bye 2. So minus 2 on both sides. So now I've got the cube root equals negative 1 minus 2 is negative 3. Now he's isolated. So I'm going to cube, because that's the inverse, cube both sides. Cube root and cube go bye-bye. Then I go to my friend the calculator and I put negative 3 to the 3rd power in, and it'll tell me that that's negative 27, because negative 3 times negative 3 times another negative 3 makes negative 27. So isolate, cube, and solve for x. All right, let's see if this one's done. Here's the cube root. He's got a 2 in front of him and a 7 behind him. I got to isolate, so I'm going to move the 7 over first. So I've got 2 times the cube root of x. 1 minus 7 is negative 6. But he's still not isolated. Here he is. He's got a 2 in front of him, so I'm going to divide by 2 on both sides. So now I've got cube root of x. Negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. And now he's isolated. So to get rid of a cube root, I'm going to cube both sides. So cube root and cube will cancel. And over here on the side, I'm going to go to my calculator and put negative 3 to the 3rd power. And he says negative 3 times himself 3 times is negative 27. So again, isolate, cube, solve for x. That's mostly what we're doing. Isolate, use the inverse, either cubing or cube rooting.